How you doing, guys? Today I'm gonna do a breakdown of the upcoming fight between Errol Spence and Spence-Tszyu. It's a great matchup between two former champions. Errol Spence was the unified champion at 147 pounds and a former pound-for-pound level fighter. Spence-Tszyu, champion at 154 pounds. He was ascending, but he took some, tough losses over the last few years. Both guys trying to get back. It's going to be in Spence-Tszyu's home country, which is an advantage with the traveling. When you travel, you got to make weight, got to get adjusted to food, time zone, you're dehydrated. So Tszyu does have an advantage with that, and he's never lost at home. The fight is now being contested at 160 pounds, where before it was supposed to be a little smaller, I think 158, if I'm not mistaken. People are making a big deal about that. Thinking that Spence won't be in shape. I don't believe that to be the case. I think Spence will be in great shape, the best shape that he could have possibly got in for this fight. I think my guess, without knowing, is that he just didn't feel it was necessary to cut the last 2 pounds, having to deal with the travel, because your body gets stuck when you travel. Your body gets stuck. I've seen fighters, when we go from Philly to Vegas, their body gets stuck. So sitting on the plane from the US to Australia, your body is going to get stuck. You probably, you're going to be dehydrated. Plane food is only but so good. You're sleeping on the plane. Your body just feels off. Probably should have, they say it takes maybe 3 weeks to get used to a time zone. So Errol Spence got over there maybe, today is the 15th, 16th. So he got over there about 10 days before his fight, 9 days before his fight. Let's see how it works out for him. For the fight itself, it's a dangerous fight for both guys. Both guys can get stopped in this fight. Spence-Tszyu is a super sharp puncher. He's very sharp. He's more sharp than he is powerful, though, in my opinion. They build him as like this big destructive puncher. I don't view him as a big destructive puncher. I view him as a very good puncher who's very sharp, and he's offensively orientated. I don't view him as like this lights out guy. I don't think he's as good as puncher as his father is. I think that that's a little bit misleading with the nickname and, the way he acts. You would think that he's a bigger puncher than what he is, and it's not wrong with that. But I watched his fights very closely. He's not really a one-punch guy. He's not like a brutal puncher, but he's very sharp, and he does seem to have some pretty hard hands. He throws a really good right hand and a really good left hook to the body. Southpaws lead with the liver, so Earl's gonna have to be very careful of that shot. Earl's gonna also have to defend the right hand well. Terrence Crawford fought Earl in the southpaw position, but Earl didn't defend his right hand well at all. Crawford hit Earl with a lot of right hooks, a lot of jabs. So Earl's gonna have to really concentrate on defending Spence-Tszyu's right hand. And Ugas hit Earl with a lot of right hands. So I'm sure that that's going to be a punch that Spence-Tszyu is going to be, going after with Earl. On the other end, we've seen Tszyu beat up and sort of broken by Fundora. And although Earl and Fundora aren't built alike, they got similar principles. They run you hot, which means that they carry you at a pace that you just can't take. And they're volume punchers, but they also guys that score a good amount of knockouts. I think Earl's a little bit better puncher than Fundora, but we don't know. But the way it looks, he seems to be a little bit of a better puncher than Fundora. The Bachram fight is one thing. I don't really look at that fight and take too much away from it as far as what Earl could do, because Bachram and Earl fight totally different, for the exception of Spence-Tszyu took a terrible beating in that fight. The fight should have been stopped. We've seen fights stop much earlier, and they let him keep going. And I think that kind of beating comes back to bite you, because when you're concussed and you're on the verge of being knocked out, and you keep getting beat and you keep getting beat, and you got so much heart and willpower, you keep trying. I think it was 3 or 4 knockdowns, and they were bad knockdowns. Like, he was like out, he was hurt bad in that fight. So that's the only thing I take from the fight, was the beating, not so much the style thing, because Earl's not really a counter puncher. I want to touch on that. Bachram hit Earl with a lot of hit Tszyu with a lot of counter punches, but Errol's not a counter puncher. Errol is a technically sound, forceful type of fighter who puts pressure on you with a hard jab and good body punches, and he carries you at a pace that you just can't handle it. And he's like a volume power puncher, and eventually he just beats you down and stops you for the most part. At least it was that way in the prime of his career. But he's not a counter puncher. So Tszyu, if Tszyu gets off first and he's accurate, that could cause Errol a lot of problems, because Errol doesn't really counter punch. He more or less overwhelms you. It's a little bit of a difference. Tszyu kind of gets caught when he gets a little bit greedy. With Errol, that won't be the case as far as being counter punched. But what will happen is, I think that the way that they fight is going to cause for a great fight, because Errol's not going to sit back and wait for him to counter punch him, and Tszyu's fighting in front of his home crowd. He cannot take another loss. If Tszyu takes another loss at this point in his career is going to look like a flop, because with the kind of matchmaking that he was going after, and the way he was promoted like he was going to be a pound for pound type of guy. He was trying to line everybody up, and to lose to Errol after 3 years off, and Errol's coming to his home country after the Bakram and after the Fedora losses, it just wouldn't be good for his career. So I believe that we're going to see a very, very hard fight. Errol has not been hit without headgear in 3 years, and the last time he was in the ring, he was stopped by Terrence Crawford. No matter how tough you are, that is a concern for any fighter. My favorite fighter was Sugar Ray Leonard. He didn't get knocked down by Tommy Hearns, Roberto Duran, or for Benitez. He takes 2 years off and comes back and gets dropped by Kevin Howard. And Kevin Howard was nowhere near on the level of the guys that I just named. But when you're not used to being hit, sometimes your punch resistance or just your balance or just your ability to absorb punches is thrown off. So you have to see how Errol reacts early to Tszyu's power and his sharpness. It's going to be something that Errol's going to have to deal with and get over, and I believe he will. I believe that Errol is a very mentally strong fighter. He has no give in him. He's able to work really hard. He's able to fight really hard. A lot of people took a lot of things from the Terrence Crawford fight, but one thing that I took from the fight is Errol never stopped trying to win. He doesn't discourage easy. Tszyu, on the other hand, he stopped trying to win in the Fedora fight. He was okay with kind of just giving in to, okay, Fedora is just a superior fighter. I didn't see Errol do that with Terrence Crawford. And although both guys lost and both guys were stopped, Errol fought harder to not take his loss. I believe that Errol can fight tired better than Tszyu. I believe he can fight hurt better than Tszyu. I could believe he could fight underwater better than Tszyu. And I believe that he could be the dog on the bottom more than Tszyu can. And that's important. I wouldn't be surprised if both guys got knocked down. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a lot of blood. Errol was bleeding in his fight with Crawford. I know he had some reconstructive things done to his face. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw blood. I wouldn't be surprised, like I said, if both guys go down early. But I think Errol can suffer more. I think he can fight fatigue better.